All right, and we have the audio. Very good. Okay, so now we have it on Audacity here, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go to Effect. We're going to go to Normalize. We're gonna get rid of as much silence as possible, and then we're gonna export as wave. All right, so now we're gonna go to our desktop, drag this into FL Studio, like so. Okay, so now we're gonna open this up and we have quite a few options in here. I'm gonna change this to Stretch Pro really quick, and just to show you a little bit about what this does, I'm just gonna zoom in on the clip here a little bit. So you can change the pitch, and this is up 1 octave, 1,200 cents, 1,200 cents is 1 octave. And if we play in the song.
Why isn't it possible? It's just not. Why not?
Yep. We go down, it'll be an octave lower.
Why isn't it possible? It's just not. Why not, you stupid bastard?
You can also change it to, let's say, half an octave.
Why isn't it possible? It's just not. Why not, you stupid bastard?
You can also change the formant.
Why isn't it possible? It's just not. Why not, you stupid bastard?
So if this is just normal, you change the formant all the way up.
Why isn't it possible? It's just not. Why not, you stupid bastard?
What I like about Stretch Pro is you can change the pitch. And what happens when you change pitch here or up here is that the format of the vocals doesn't change. It just changes the overall tone or timbre. What format does is it brings up the core frequencies of the vocals or whatever you're using to sample, and it matches that with the pitch. So if you really wanted it to sound like it's an octave lower, you turn the format down to the same amount, it's going to sound that low.
Why isn't it possible? It's just not. Why not, you stupid bastard?
So that is that control here. Now you can change this to make it speed up or slow down. Now what I'm going to do with this sample right here is I'm going to create a whole set of instruments, of percussion samples, solely using this. So what I'm going to do is we're going to zoom in really far, and we're going to look at the transients. So right here, I'm seeing.
Why?
So right here is a good example of a good transient. Also here, you can see the shape is kind of what you want. You want a really percussive spike in the audio.
Stupid.
So I think I'm going to use this right here just for the bass drum or the kick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to.
Why isn't it stupid bastard?
Use my cut tool, press Alt and Shift to create a selection that just goes to the edge of this. And then we're going to kind of slowly go through here and see where that ends.
Stupid.
So it's kind of in between here. So we're going to cut it off right at this section. So I'm going to do Control Shift again, or Alt Shift again to cut it there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to select this. Now what we're going to move this down here. I'm going to solo this track in particular. Now what we can do is when we zoom in on this clip, we have this little bar that can be dragged over. So if we just listen to this, it should sound a little bit like a kick drum. And you can hear that there's that bass in there. That's why I want to use this as a kick, because there's a little bit of bass. All right, I just did a little bit of gain staging here. What I'm going to do now is make this unique, and we're going to call this our kick. So that is our kick. Now what we can do in here, we can change the pitch in here or the formant, see if we can get it sounding a little bit more kick-like. All right, that sounds pretty good. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to route this to a free mixer track, and we're going to start adding effects. The first thing I'm going to do, though, is add an EQ and roll off some of the rumble. So most kicks, they kind of end up being around 32 hertz as far as the cutoff. They don't really go below 32 often. There isn't that much of that low sub rumble in there, just because that's usually reserved for the sub or the bass line. So let's listen to the kick. And as you can see, it ends up actually being more around 52 hertz, which is fine. You see we're in the sub area, but what we can do is we can increase the bass a little bit and maybe a little bit of the sub. All right, so we kind of have a basic shape here for that. Now we're going to go in and we're going to cut a couple things that we don't want out of it. So for instance, this frequency, okay, we can boost this frequency a little bit. I don't like, however, this frequency here is kind of annoying. So we're going to kind of zero in on it and just make it go down a little bit. Great. Now I'm going to add Neutron 3 elements, and it has a couple modules here that I like to use. First, we're actually going to use a transient shaper. So we want a little more attack, and we want a little less sustain. So that's giving us a pretty good kick sound. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to add a compressor. Turn this to true. Turn automatic gain off because we don't want it compensating for the gain. We want to do that by ourselves. So we're going to go pretty extreme here on the compression. And this is a technique that I'm going to use called parallel compression. So it's when you have a mixture of both the dry wet signal on the compression. So instead of the mix being all the way up to 100, you can mix some of the dry signal with the fully compressed audio right here. So we're just going to make this sound as good as possible. And I'm going to reference over here on my current channel display and figure out, we want it to sit around -6 to -9 decibels to sit well in the mix. Okay, so we can increase this probably by 1.5 decibels. Okay, that's sitting pretty well. So now we're going to re-EQ. Because of that compression, it's going to bring some of those frequencies that we cut away back. So we're going to put a high pass. So as you can see, that notch that we made before came back a little bit. So we're going to make that a little quieter. And so that's our kick. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to adjust the audio out after the EQ. And let's see here, let's add a little bit. We're going to make a drum bus here in just a second. So I'm going to add kind of some parallel processing on all the drums to make them sound a little more cohesive. All right, next step, we're going to try to find a good transient to use as a snare. So this is going to have some good punchier mid frequencies as well as some high frequencies. So let's scroll around here and just kind of listen to what we have.
Why isn't it possible? Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not, you stupid bastard? Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why? Why not? Why?
I know I said I was going to look for a snare here, but I'm actually thinking I found a good transient to use for a hi-hat. So I'm going to cut this out right now just so I don't lose it. So we're going to hold Shift and Alt and get as close to the transient as possible. So we're going to probably want to end up trimming this. Let's just trim it a little longer just to be safe. All right, now let's grab this and put it down here. Solo it. And we'll loop just this. Okay, so this sounds pretty good. What we're going to do is we're also going to make this clip unique. So you can hear when it's looping, there's a lot of bass. Hi-hats don't have bass, so we're going to use a high-pass filter and an EQ to roll those off. All of this bass and sub is unnecessary and unneeded, and it's going to make the mix a lot more muddy. There's going to be a lot more rumble in the bass, and it's going to sound out of tune and annoying. So that sounds pretty good. What I'm going to do is boost frequencies around here. Cut those frequencies a little bit. Let's add an OTT. Let's just check our spectrum analyzer and see what that looks like. That's not a bad hi-hat. What I am going to do is add another EQ here. Just kind of make this sound a little less harsh. So in the mix and in the spectrum, you can see it's a little more balanced. But that's a pretty good hi-hat. So I'm thinking what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use audio from the word bastard. I'm going to use the B as kind of the impact, the more kind of tone of the snare, and I'm going to use the S sound from bastard to use as kind of that high hissing noise from the snare. So we're just going to zoom in a little bit. We're going to cut out using Shift and Alt. Get as close as we can again. We're going to listen to the selection.
Bastard, 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 bastard.
I'm going to cut about right here. And this section in particular is going to be the mid portion of the kick. We're going to zoom in again and just get the higher parts. All right, there's one more piece that I wanted to get. There's this really nice transient here that I think has a good potential for another kind of mid sound that could be used within a snare. So we're going to chop that out as well. So now that we have kind of all of our sections that we need for the drums, I'm just going to go in here and figure out how this snare is going to sound. Okay, great. Now what we're going to do is we are going to export this as the snare. So we're basically just freezing these three tracks in place to get them where we want. And then what we can do is we can import it as a sample, and then we can tune the snare to the song. So we're going to call this our why not snare. Let's render it out. Now what we can do is drag that in. Now we have the snare. Beautiful. So now what we have here is we have a kick, snare, and a hi-hat. All right, so I've made a little drum loop here with the sample, and this is what it sounds like. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do something a little bit more technical, and we're going to do some synthesis with the sample. So we're going to take Serum. You can use any wavetable synth that you want, as long as you can import the sample into a wavetable. So what we're going to do is we're going to import via fixed frame size. And we're going to add why isn't it possible dot wave, and we're going to guess. So now we have a wave table of that entire sample. So, but what I want is only these cells where there is kind of a lot going on. So I'm going to select there to there, remove all except selected, normalize each game separately, process, we're going to remove the fundamental from each, normalize each again. Then what we're going to do, we're going to morph spectral 0 fund phase. This is going to make a really smooth transition between the wavetables. I'm just going to move the octave down 2, and this is what it sounds like. So we have a really nice growl that we can work with here. All right, so I've messed around a little bit more with this bass sound. I got it to sound a little bit more of how I want it to. So I've noticed that I want a little bit of reverb on it. So what I like to do with reverb, instead of just throwing reverb on top of it, what I like to do is I like to duck the volume of the reverb while the main sound is playing so that they're not clashing and there isn't any phase interpolation. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to grab another one of these and dock it to the right side just so that we can use this as our bass reverb send. And in here, we're going to go down here and go to Fruity Peak Controller. We're going to select the volume slider. We're going to link it to controller, internal controller, peak control, LF, peak control, peak. So now, as you can see, I'm going to route that to this, and this to this. So you can see the volume is coming back up after the bass is done playing, and that's exactly what we want. So we're going to add Valhalla Room here. We want dark space, mix 100%. We're going to change this to about there. Decay should be around 3. High cut depth should be pretty low. And then we're going to change this to more of a late, so it sounds a little bit larger. Yeah. I want it to be a little bit louder, so we'll change. Just filling in that extra space in between the note, giving it a little bit more texture, a little bit more bright, a little fuller sound. All right, so I've adjusted some of the levels on the thing, on some of the instruments and the bass, and this is what it sounds like now. So that's just one section, one half of an 8-bar, of a 4-bar section even. We're not even at 8 bars yet. But just showing you, it is taking me an hour and 1 minute to create all of these instruments and all of these sounds just from one sample. So it's very time consuming, but I'm showing you that it can be done. All right, so as you can see, I've worked on this a little bit more. I'm just going to show you a little bit of what's going on here, and especially down here with all of this automation, and just kind of tell you what things were made by the sample and what things were not. So if we zoom in here, you will see the original sample. So if we just play this section without the effects.
Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not, you stupid bastard?
Yep. So this is the original sample. I went into Stretch Pro, adjusted the time so it fit a 4-bar section here right before the drop. And as far as the effects goes, I just threw a 25 hertz cut out the low end rumble. I used OTT with 50% depth, 100% time, minus 4.9 dB, and I turned the low gain down all the way to get rid of the rumble. Also used a parametric EQ to get rid of more rumble. And then I used Serum Effects. So what I did here is just kind of give it a little bit more width. Same thing with here. Then I used some distortion to give it a little bit of drive, a little more crunch, just to make it sound kind of crispy. I used Chorus again to give it a little more stereo width. Then this filter here is a comb minus filter. It just kind of gives it more of a metallic sound, and that's kind of what you hear right away. And I will show you here what that sounds like now with the effects turned on.
Why isn't it possible?
Yes. And then I added delay and reverb, just a normal delay going at quarter note speed, not going too far on a stereo image, just kind of staying center because the audio itself, I widened it out, so I wanted the echo to kind of sound like it's going far away from you. Then I added a little bit of reverb here as well.
Why isn't it possible?
And now you can see I added some automation here on the reverb, turned it off right here. Same thing with the delay. And then I turned the filter effects, kind of like the metallic sound, off right as we got here. And then I changed the pitch informant in this section. So I'll play it with all the automation and effects.
Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not, you stupid
Bastard.
And that is the sample. So at the beginning of the video, I kind of showed you that I made these drums here, as well as this bass sound. Using just this sample, just small sections of this sample. Then after that, I made just a saw wave with a sub, and that is the second bass of this drop here. And this is what that sounds like by itself. So that's something that wasn't made by the sample. Same thing with this stab. I did a little bit of work on the kick. It sounds a lot more natural and a lot less like just a sample. Sounds a lot more like a kick. Just did a lot heavier processing. I added a comb filter and distortion. And then in the drums bus, I added some saturation using magnetite. And then on this drums bus, I also added a limiter here without equalizing or imager, just to make sure that the levels weren't going beyond a safe level, so that there wasn't too much compression and distortion when running through the master chain. I also changed a little bit of the snare. It's got a little more metallic. I added a flange minus filter and some distortion. So it sounds kind of crunchy and metallic like. And then with the hi-hat, that is the incorrect one. Then with the hi-hat, I added OTT, another EQ, and some distortion with a high-pass filter to make it sound a little more natural, like a real hi-hat. So now there is a bunch of different, there is about 5 here, different automation clips happening. And this is all affecting the master chain using this plugin called Mishby. This is by Freak Show Industries. You can either buy this or get it for free, but this just does, there's a lot of different things happening, and there's not a lot of kind of description of what things do. So you kind of have to play around with it and figure it out for yourself. This one's pretty self-explanatory. This tells you the noise, but I'm just going to play this last section right here without the effect on. And now we're going to let it do its thing. And I'll leave it open so you can see exactly what's happening. So as you can see, I changed this parameter, this one, and this one all simultaneously, and it creates like a distortion effect, kind of glitchy. Kind of sounds like it's fading out and not running correctly, like the software isn't running correctly, and I thought that was great. Then the last sample I added was the Windows XP shutdown sound. So now, starting from the beginning, this is what it sounds like. All right, so that's my breakdown of this assignment. I hope you found this informative, Dr. Lohmeyer. I'm not entirely sure when this is going to get to you, hopefully before the assignment is due. I do have to edit it, and the amount of recording that I did was a little over an hour, so we'll see. But thank you for watching. I hope you learned something because, to be honest, I wasn't exactly sure I could make percussion and other kind of sounds like this. So it was kind of a shot in the dark, but I'm glad it worked out. So yeah. See you later.